2020 is literally almost over, and you know what time it is? It's time to do our end of year list videos. Yes, I am so pumped to present you guys my best and worst list for 2020. I love doing those videos. They're a passion. They're my favorite things to do on my channel. I love refreshing the movies that I've seen this year that I love and hate. And of course, we're going to start off with the positive notes. These are my top 10 favorite movies of 2020. Now, before we get into this video, first of all, 2020 has been probably the most interesting year, full of a lot of bad luck events. First, bushfires that came in Australia, and of course, the elephant in the room, or the elephant of the year I should call it, the coronavirus. Everyone's in lockdown, pandemic, which that means not much movies have came out in 2020. Most of them have been delayed to 2021, or movies just been streaming and not being in theaters. So far now, theaters are back open again. Everything's open here in Victoria, but I know some other countries are suffering through the coronavirus, especially England. What I've heard is suffering through the COVID-20. So for people in England and even all around the world, hopefully you guys are safe. Hopefully you guys wear your face mask, use hand sanitizers, just be safe and follow the restrictions. So with all that said, even though I haven't seen much movies in 2020, I still have enough movies to talk about for my favorite movies of the year and the worst movies of the year. But of course we're going to start talking about my favorite movies of 2020. And this is a biased list. Not all these movies are considered masterpieces because of course not much movies came out in 2020. These are just movies in my opinion are considered pretty fun movies, but also great movies as well. Movies that I enjoyed in this really terrible year of movies. And if you don't like any of the movies on this list, that is completely fine. Make your own top 10 favorite movies of 2020 in the link below. I really want to know your picks. So of course we're going to start off with some honorable mentions, and of course I've dressed up for this video because of course this is an important video, and I feel like most people have dressed up to do their best list, so I'm like, I might as well dress myself up. So, here are some of my honorable mentions, and they're biased too. Some movies people hate what I mention out of these honorable mentions, but this is just bias. This is my personal list, so don't kill me. One of them, Birds of Prey, Richard Jewell, Sonic the Hedgehog, I Still Believe, All Together Now, Onward, Bill and Ted Face the Music, The Devil All the Time, Borat subsequent movie film, and don't kill me for this last one because I know people really are disappointed by this movie, but Wonder Woman 1984. So guys, no further ado, these are my top 10 best movies that I have seen in one of the worst years in history, 2020. So of course, you know what I'm going to say guys, let's start this list off with number 10. So we're going to start off this list with The Gentlemen. This is a movie that has a lot of people in it, including Hugh Grant, Matthew McConaughey, Colin Farrell, Charlie Hunnam, Henry Golding. Everyone in this movie is just fantastic. But that's not one of the reasons I love The Gentlemen. I love Guy Ritchie's style in this movie. He is great with crime movies like, you know, Snitch, and this is definitely his best since that movie. I think this movie's well acted, the story base, the narrative is so well done, very original. You can tell that it's his style. This film's a good black comedy, it's violent, but also it's pretty intense in some scenes. The Gentlemen is definitely worthy of a good time, and this film came out all the way in January. Cannot believe I still remember it till now. Now, like I said before, not all movies are considered masterpieces of this year. These are just movies that I had fun with. One of the examples is Freaky. Take basically every switching body movie, but make it into a slasher movie, and I think that is a great idea. When I watch the trailers of this movie, I'm like, okay, this is going to be fun. Christopher Landon really directed this movie really well. If you don't know him, he directed Happy Death Day movies. He did such a really interesting developed with this movie. He directs this movie really well. Vince Vaughn definitely brings up one of his better performances that I've seen in a comedy movie. This is a really fun slaughter movie that is hilarious, but also pretty terrifying at the exact same time. And I'm really excited to see what Christopher Landon does next with his movies switching into horror type movies. Now, there are some movies that really surprised us in 2020. There are some movies on my list that I thought it's going to be terrible, but it turns out actually pretty freaking good. Take an example for Bad Boys for Life. I was so surprised of how much fun I had with Bad Boys for Life. And in my opinion, it's probably my favorite movie in the trilogy. I'm a fan of the first two Bad Boys. I grew up with those movies. The third Bad Boys gave us something special though. It's action-packed, it's hilarious, but surprisingly very heartfelt, which I never expected that in a Bad Boys movie. Even not expecting a Bad Boys movie to be on my top 10 best list. Here it is, Will Smith is a great actor, but this is also a great return for Martin Lawrence. I haven't seen him in a movie in so long, and this is a great return for him because he's fantastic in this movie. Everyone did a great job, the action scenes are great, the comedy is well freaking done, and the first Bad Boys movie, not even directed by Michael Bay, and these directors really did the first installment really, really well. 7. Now, of course, there are some surprises, there are some fun movies, but also there are some underrated movies on my list. Take Over the Moon, for example. Pearl is definitely a really good animated comedy. They did Abominable last year. I find that movie fantastic, but definitely Over the Moon proves to us that Pearl is definitely one of the most underrated animated comedies, and they should do more movies to make us appreciate their style. Everything about Over the Moon is so underrated. It's an underrated musical, it's an underrated animated film for families and kids. This film, of course, has really great characters. The animation looks absolutely stunning, like it looks very colorful, very beautiful. It's a movie that I think families should watch on Netflix. It's definitely a movie that teaches kids lessons throughout the entire movie. 6. Now, coming to my number 6 is definitely one of the most controversial movies. That's really fine. Most of these movies on my list have different types of genres. This one, controversial. Some people find this movie confusing, some people find this movie really good, some people find this bad. In my opinion, I find this movie a masterpiece, and that is Tenet. The first time I watched Tenet is definitely a pretty interesting experience. I was first very confused from the first half of the movie. Then when the second half comes, it made me want to watch this movie again. And then the second time I watched it, it definitely comes into me. I loved everything about Tenet. It's not the best Christopher Nolan film though, which that is fine with me. Because most Christopher Nolan films, I never find them bad at all. Even Interstellar, I loved. But I would say Tenet is definitely one of the most interesting movies that Christopher Nolan has done. John David Washington was fantastic in this movie, and Robert Pattinson, man, he proves to us that he is not Ed Wood from Twilight anymore. He can act in movies. But the best thing about this movie is when you see the backwards time connecting with the forward time, everything about those moments, the action was just mind-blowing to watch. This is definitely one of the mind-blowing movies that I've seen in 2020. 5. Alright guys, up to my top 5. These are the movies that I freaking love in 2020 the most. My number 5 is a movie that technically did came out in 2019 in the US, but it did came out in 2020 in January in Australia, so I'm counting this as my 2020 film, and that movie is 1917. Definitely one of the best war films that I've seen since Hacksaw Ridge. Everything about 1917 was an experience. It's a one-shot movie with only one little cut of the movie. That is it. That is freaking impressive. Sam Mendes, who directed Skyfall, which I really do love, directs this movie in the most original way for a war film. Everything about this movie is a mind-blowing experience, and I basically saw this movie very blind. I haven't seen any trailers, and I'm glad I did, because this movie is definitely a mind-blowing experience, intense movie from start to finish that I didn't know what's happening till when I watched the movie, and I get everything about this movie. Everything about 1917 was just thrilling. 4. Now, another underrated movie that's going to be on my list, and that is Words on Bathroom Walls. People, check out this movie. This is definitely, in my opinion, one of the most underrated coming-of-age films that I have ever seen. This is just about a guy that's dealing with this disease of schizophrenia, and they use schizophrenia, the disease, really effectively and really original. They basically made this disease into different sections of characters, and I thought that's actually really interesting. This is a heartfelt coming-of-age drama that follows this guy really dealing with something that he wants to get rid of. It's a good romance film, it's a good family drama film, like not the genre, just the movie itself. It's a movie that will definitely tear you up the whole way through, but also smile the whole way through. 3. Now, definitely like Bad Boys for Life, this is a movie that I thought it will suck. I thought this is a rip-off of some other movie that I love, but definitely this movie really hits me. And turns out to me, best summer film of 2020 that isn't really a summer film, but it should have been. That movie is Love and Monsters. Honestly, I thought this movie was going to be a terrible Zombieland ripoff, but just with monsters. No, Love and Monsters honestly felt like its own thing. It's definitely the best performance that I've seen Dylan O'Brien in. It's a good romantic comedy, it's a good sci-fi film, but honestly, this film is harmless for family. I think families should check out this film because this is definitely a film that I think kids will like. It's awesome, it's badass, it's just very action-packed. It's also a really good coming-of-age story. It's everything you wanted for a summer movie to be, and honestly, if the coronavirus didn't happen, this would have been the best summer film that I've seen in 2020 because I had a blast with Love and Monsters. Now, 2 and 1 is definitely the hardest because those two movies, I would say they are both my number 1, but of course I have to split them. Number 2 is definitely the only best horror film of the year, and that is The Invisible Man. This is definitely one of the worst years for horror films. There's a lot of shit horror films that came out this year, but I'm so thankful that The Invisible Man at least is the best out of the horror films I've seen. Everything about this movie is so intense, it's so thrilling, especially from the camera work. The camera work of this movie was fantastic, and what's great about The Invisible Man is that it's not part of the dark universe that we think it is. It felt like its own thing, and that's what horror films should be now these days. Not be in universes, even other movies. I want movies to be basically on its own, with no sequels or anything. The Invisible Man definitely delivered that. Elisabeth Moss needs to get nominated. I know the Oscars is not happening, but if it did happen, she would definitely be nominated for Best Actress for sure, because she was phenomenal in this movie. Everything about this movie connects horror really well, or even sci-fi really well, which is something that we did not expect from The Invisible Man. Of course, The Invisible Man was scary, it was terrifying. I was literally gripping the whole way through. Even when I bought this on Blu-ray, I still was gripping. Alright, my number one. This is my favorite movie that I have seen in 2020. This is a year that's pretty much the worst year. But there's one movie that saved this year. And I think you guys know what it is, because my last review I did on 2020 movie reviews. My number one goes to Disney Pixar's Soul. I love everything about this movie. I gave this movie a 9 out of 10 for a reason. I watched this movie literally multiple times, and every single time I've seen Soul, I just love it even more. This movie, of course, has a great story, great characters, fantastic relaxing animation. This is, in my opinion, one of the better Pixar films since Coco. Jamie Foxx, Tina Fey, great chemistry in this film. This is a great story about life. It's a story about teaching us that we can all make mistakes and we can overcome them, but also finding yourself, who you really are. This movie, of course, is one of the most emotional films of the year. I cried my ass off during this film. I haven't cried this much since Inside Out, which took from the director Pete Docter, who directed that movie. Soul, in my opinion, is one of the better animated films so far in this decade. Everything about Soul represents what I love about not just animated films, but movies in general, and that's why Soul is my favorite movie I have seen in 2020. So guys, that is it. My top 10 best movies of 2020. Of course, my top 10 worst movies are coming very soon. There's a lot of bad movies that came out in 2020, so that list is going to be fun. Let me know down below, what are your top 10 favorite movies of 2020? Let me know. I really want to know your list. Even make a video response. I really want to know. Make sure you guys follow me on Facebook, Status, Instagram, Twitter. Keep contacting me, and make sure you guys subscribe to my channel to notify for more movie reviews and other movie related content. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a nice day.